Probably power when you think about it.
See if there's a hybrid opportunity, but the fact of the matter still remains, we need to take this program over, and so this is an opportunity for the city council to do things a little differently, as you would want to design it, and so that's why we need this conversation with you to understand what those policy type discussions need to be and where you would stand on those. So
we're thinking about all the ward council members that will have to get a mower?
yeah, something of that nature. Something of that nature. So,
Yeah.
So Chris drew the short straw on who gets this new program, and so I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and we'll get going.
Okay, good morning. Chris Johansson, Neighborhood Services Director. Just kind of a recap, January 9th, we did bring this before you. As Scott alluded to, the county's no longer going to be doing this for the city of Des Moines. So this is something the Neighborhood Services Department is going to be doing. Couple things that we do need to clarify before the spring season starts is obviously the city's policy. Staffing, which last on January 9th we did discuss, and we have started down that path already. And the big one, and really for the purpose today, is we are going to have to put together a request for proposals for mowing contract. So there's some specific parts of the RFP that we do need to get discussed and approved by council before we can move forward with that. Just a little bit of a recap from last meeting. I know there were some questions that council asked, and we were able to discuss these with the county and did do other research as well. The annual cost of the county's program, they weren't able to give an estimate for their cost, and one of the reasons is the way they operate the program. It is intermingled amongst their other operations. They use, I think it's their public works staff to do the mowing, and they have existing staff that handles the complaints and the notices, so it wasn't an easy cost to give us. How many complaints did they receive, and how many were repeat complaints? So since 2018, there was 8,800. So basically over the 4 years, I think you could average about 2,200 a year. One of the interesting parts of that, out of the 8,800, almost 2,700 were the same property. So there are a lot of repeat offenders, habitual violators that come across with this program. How often will this type of inspection overlap with other type of inspections that we currently do? Yep.
On the 8,800?
Yep.
Does a validated case mean a case where they had to send a mower out?
Yep.
Or a validated case is where an inspector went out and it was confirmed that there was a violation, but I mean, do we have a sense of how many were actually remedied by the property owner versus?
Yeah. The violation.
The ones that were. Morning, Dalton Jacobus, NID administrator. So the 8,800 is the validated cases, and about twice that many were complaints that they got. So just because it was a complaint doesn't mean it was actually in violation.
No, that's not what I'm at. So what I'm asking is how many of those 8,800, because I assume some people, when they were in violation, they get a notice, they go out and mow their own lawn, or they go out and mow their property, whatever it may be. How many of those did they actually have to send a mow crew out for?
I'm not sure, but I can find out.
Okay. Seems like an important data point to understand, too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next question was how often will this type of inspection overlap with other type? And one thing to note, it is often. We don't know the exact number, but we know just on our side, usually if there was a junk and debris case, the county would communicate with us to make sure we had those items removed from the property before they were able to get in and mow. So that's something that we have observed on our side that did happen often. Overlap with vacant property registration. Will this include backyards and front yards? Currently in the vacant property registration in our current code, we do already require contact information for the owner, authorized management agent. So that does give us a contact and who to talk to. And it also does state the property shall be mowed, kept clear of weeds, volunteer trees, and snow shall be cleared as required by the code. With regards to the backyards and front yards, the county, it did include backyards in theirs. For us, one thing we are looking at and working on with legal is more of a access into the backyards. That's an issue that we're going to have to work through, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. Remaining couple of questions. Currently, the county currently mows city property along 4 Mile Creek. Will this continue? The response to that was yes. Will the county continue their mowing program for seniors? They'll continue that as well. And we can recoup costs, but what can we issue for penalties, specifically for repeat offenders? This is a policy decision. We are going to touch on this today. This is going to need direction from the council. The county did not have any penalties on top of their actual mowing costs. What will the city do about no mow May? This is one that we're going to have to discuss, we will discuss today. Currently, the county did not, they continued their inspections during the month of May last year, but if this is something that we would want, it'd be something we'd have to adopt into an ordinance. But last year, the county did cite violations for no mow May. One thing that was commented on, it was pretty dry May last year, so we're not sure how many actual violations there would have been, but this is something we're going to need direction on as well. Any other questions about responses we got back? So again, just need direction from council to put together the program. Obviously, we're going to go over the process with noticing habitual violations, expectations, what our level of service should be, and specific to the policy, the height standards and municipal code update. First, a little bit about process. And I know through conversations Scott has had with the county, I know this is something that we are working on with them currently. So I know some of this can change, but one of the things we did want to get in front of you is both what the county's process was and compare that to our normal public nuisance process that the city of Des Moines has. First part, the county didn't do what we call a locate to find all the owners and interested property owners to send the notices to. They use the owner and mailing address that's listed on the assessor's website. Our normal locate process is we do a little bit more thorough review and identify all owners and legally interested parties. A certified letter was sent to the owner. That's very similar to what we do. County is given 7 days for compliance, and their goal for abatement by the county is to occur within 14 days of the complaint. Where it differs a little bit on the city side is we have an appeal process. We did ask the county what they do with appeals. A lot of them were handled directly by the administrator. We have an administrative law judge process that we have used for ours in the past. And that's usually the biggest time constraint in getting into that process. Invoice sent to the owner. Upon non-payment, costs can be assessed. When it gets to our time for abatement is usually that 14 to 45 days, depending upon the appeal request. One thing where we have been talking, where I know Scott has been talking with the county, is on the notice process. If that's something that we can work with them on, keeping that process with the county, we do take we do the verification. They administer kind of the notice piece of it, administer sending the notices. And then if they're still in violation, that'd be something that we'd work on our end with abating the nuisance with the mowing.
I just wanted to add that it's very likely that whatever the county continues to do will just be for 1 year, for calendar year 2023. They want to be completely out of it for 2024.
Chris?
Yep.
2 questions. So are these 10 calendar days or 10 business days?
It's calendar. 10 calendar days.
That might be help to clarify that. And so then if they appeal, let's see. I'm just trying to, like, if I had a neighbor that wasn't mowing,
Mm-hmm.
and someone appeals, then the time to abate, the clock starts after the appeal is completed, not after when it was first reported.
Yeah, what is the timeline from when you have an issue to the timeline that they would actually, something be done if they appealed? So how many days is that, Carl? Like, because your yard, if it's 14 to 45 days, I mean, what is the timeline do we see?
Normally in the appeal, the clocks, the clock stands still at that point.
Okay.
You allow time for the appeal to happen, then after the decision's made, then you move forward with the enforcement.
I think we should be clear about that, because there's probably a neighbor who's going to say, how long do they get for this?
Yeah.
So
I know our current...
might shore that up just a little bit.
Yeah, our current process with the administrative law judge, just on regular junk and debris cases, a lot of it's just scheduling, getting time in front of the law judge.
Sure.
I'm sure there's other ways that we could handle an appeal for these type of complaints, because I think the types of issues you could appeal on with tall grass is limited.
Well, I was just going to say, that seems like a step that I don't know why we would need or have administrative to do it, because I don't think you can, if you have that many days, the summer's almost over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, quite honestly, it would be people that have called in. I just think it seems like a very long period of time. You either have tall grass or you don't.
Well, I mean, yeah, it seems very generous. And if you go out with a yardstick and the grass is tall, like, well, what's there to appeal? But so if they have this senior program, now that's a volunteer program, right?
Yes.
Okay. Jeez.
Just on a note, what there is to appeal is that it could be a pollinator garden, it could be native grass. There's a lot of stuff that you could appeal. So if you go out and mow somebody's yard and you did it wrong, like, you've ruined, I don't know how much work someone has put into that.
I'm just saying, I don't know if you need to go through, I think administratively, they could understand, or somebody contact, and, you can make that determination. I don't think it needs to be this long a process with administrative attorney and all that. I mean, I just think we could, but is that you have to do it? I mean, the county didn't do it, so I'm just
There
questioning.
has to be some administrative review.
Right.
And that's what we do now. And instead of having an in-house administrative law judge, because we had a lot of trouble with that early on, that's what we used to do with somebody that we contracted with straight up. We go to the state now for the administrative law judges, and that's been very well received in the district court level. And we've got a Supreme Court case coming up that's going to tell us whether or not that that works for what we've been trying to do. But what council needs to remember is enforcement takes place, violation of municipal ordinance by municipal infraction. Municipal infractions go into court. That will take way longer if we do that. So this already is an administrative process. I don't, they're entitled to notice and an opportunity to be heard. Could we do it with somebody in-house? Yes. Is that going to give us more trouble if someone takes it up on appeal? Yes, it certainly will.
So how did the county do it? I guess I'm trying to determine why is ours different than what possibly they did?
Yeah, their administrator handled their appeals.
So we can do it in-house, but we have experience with that not going well when somebody does want to challenge it.
Okay.
So
If that doesn't go well, what are the, I mean, and this is also maybe a lower level issue, right? I mean, I don't know what cases specifically you're referring to, but
yeah, I don't really want to get into all those in a public discussion, but I'm
that's
happy
fine.
to visit with council informally about some of those.
okay.
Just for starters, if you look at the locate process, I mean, that's a great, between the two. If you don't give notice to everybody, if you miss somebody, you don't have valid notice. So you're not going to be able, number one, even if you can skate and not have a problem with litigation for not providing people due process, you're not going to be able to assess those costs. So those costs won't be assessed against the property because you didn't give valid notice and opportunity to be heard. So that's just one area that I would have a concern with what the county did versus what we would do.
Chris, just one more question about the costs. Are these just the cost to mow, or is this the cost to administer? And because there's,
I know for what we would be looking at is the cost, obviously, to mow, but also to administer the program.
oh, okay, so that would be rolled into the cost, not just the mowing part.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. A little bit just to talk about expectations. Current county standards, they have the 12-inch height, so that's the limit. Once the grass weeds get that tall, that's what triggers the complaint and enforcement. We are going to get into discussion of the height of that just shortly here. They do allow 2 weeks to abatement, so that's kind of their time frame they go with. And they do include front and backyards.
Vacant properties differently than occupied?
I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
That's a good question. We'll be happy to look at that. Treat them differently how?
Well, could we have a different standard, for example?
Like a lower level weeds or something? Or
Right. And this goes to the point, and I'm sure we'll explore this at some point, but it's the issues of no mow may, prairie and pollinator habitat. And sometimes if prairie habitat isn't kept up as well, like you might have trouble distinguishing, but I'm willing to give a little more leeway and grace to someone living in their home or someone renting a property than, for example, a property that we know is vacant and it's just a question of are they maintaining it or not. It just seems like a slightly different set of issues that maybe simplifies some things. If our vacant property registry is working like it should and we have vacant properties identified, it seems a little easier to enforce because there maybe it's a little more clear cut.
be happy to look at that.
Okay, policy discussion. Currently, no provision city code allowing for tall grass, weeds enforcement. This is something we're going to have to adopt for us to enforce. This is where we need direction from council. But before we get to allowable height, the no mow may. Just a question for council. What's council's thought on the no mow may and how enforcement should look with that?
You need a vote. It sounds like a lot of us are supportive of the no mow may, I believe.
Consensus.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the idea behind no mow may, like besides the pollinator habitat aspect of it, is that it's more environmentally friendly not to mow your lawn. And so I don't know that specifying something specific to May is really the point. The point is that ordinances like this are not super environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
And so that's where like a difference between vacant and occupied property would come in. I think it'd be important for us to be able to distinguish between like non-native and native grasses, which I don't know that we have the skill set to do that. So, I mean, like we can say like we're not going to enforce this in the month of May, but what about for the rest of the summer? If somebody was saying like, I'm going to extend this past May because I don't think it's environmentally friendly for me to mow my lawn and it's not affecting anybody. Like if it's causing problems, that's different. But if it's not like sightlines, if it's not, invasive species, but do we have the skill set to distinguish between those?
I think it gets confusing. I mean, it's no mow may, but I'd rather promote the pollinator gardens and yards and things like that and not worrying about 1 month. So it's consistency.
So, I'm certainly supportive of incorporating no mow may. Part of the idea behind no mow may, it's not just a consistency thing. It's the idea that some of the earliest pollinators are, some of the small flowers and things that pop up in yards, and so it's important to leave that habitat in that early time before the flowers and the other things bloom over the course of the summer. Again, I think it'd be better to be able to distinguish because I would draw different lines for homeowners and want to try and provide some flexibility for some homeowners that are doing different things with their yard. But I think a consistent standard is I think we do need to have a standard and a consistent standard, whatever that ends up being.
I just don't know if you get 12 inches in May. That's what I'm just saying. So if our height standard is 12 inches, so that kind of, it's really where everything's just coming up now. So I don't know if it'd be that big a problem, other than it could be confusing. So I would rather really promote that the good, what you should do. And if you don't want to mow, make sure you have the right kind of plantings and things like that work. But if you're at 12 inches, I'm just saying, I think it's nice to say, but I'd promote the whole thing in general for the whole year. But
So I'm hearing general support. It's something we're going to have to look at how you could adopt if they have those principles of pollinator gardens, something to look at continuing throughout our native grasses.
I want to make sure I'm clear, though, that there's an openness to allow a no-mow May. And so really, this program wouldn't even start until June 1.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't really.
Because April is
Yeah.
what, maybe the last week in April, you might, in certain weather events, have issues. But really, we could say the program starts every June 1st.
Yeah, that
if
would
that's
take
willing-
care of
if you're
everything
willing.
then.
And then you can promote the no-mow, you can promote the different grasses. Native grasses. There's going to be exceptions that we'll have to have for
But
water
do we have the expertise to even distinguish between those exceptions, or are people just going to get?
This is something we're going to
Yeah.
have to develop.
We're gonna
We've
have to.
we've never worked with this before,
Okay.
so.
Because I just think setting the standard as like assuming that everybody has a like sod grass lawn, we should like, I want to be encouraging obviously like native planting like citywide, but if we're setting the standard and assuming, then we're going to run into problems when people have taller grasses because they have native grasses and things like that.
We're definitely going to have to develop the expertise to handle the taller grasses that are intentionally native and have purpose.
Okay, next item, allowable height. I'm going to move forward to 2 slides and then come back to this one, just to kind of give you a view around the metro and also the Midwest of what other standards are that out there. I'll have Dalton come up and just kind of lead you through this, as I know he did the research on these. Yeah.
The same as what
And to get all the labels on the bottom to fit, I had to make them kind of small. And then Councilmember Ramble, going back to your question earlier, I believe it was 900 a year on average that they actually mowed. But I can confirm that. So of the, yeah, yep. But I will verify that. So here are the y-axis on the left. There is the height in inches. And they range anywhere from 6 inches up to 18 inches in the Des Moines area. Kind of interesting is that some of our neighboring communities have different standards for different zoning classifications or uses. So if it's a developed area or developed residential area, it has a shorter height allowance than would like an undeveloped forest reserve, commercial, industrial, agricultural. So kind of sets different standards for what residents would expect in their neighborhoods versus an industrial park or something like that. In this next slide, I can't remember who it was, but somebody asked for comparables for other larger cities in the Midwest. So I pulled a bunch of examples from larger cities in Iowa that aren't necessarily central Iowa, as well as some of our bigger neighbors, Kansas City, Omaha, Chicago, Minneapolis. So those range in height from 8 inches up to 24 inches. And again, Cedar Rapids has standards for developed versus other than developed. So
What's Dubuque?
Dubuque, I couldn't find a reference for them. I don't know if they don't enforce.
Okay.
Do we know what roughly what height grass starts to seed at? I
don't
think
know.
that would set a decent standard.
And I think it kind of depends on what grass too. So if you look at your yard, you've got, so just a little background. I started in public service and like native areas maintenance. So pretty closely acquainted to this subject. Depends on what grass you've got. So your typical turf grass lawn is going to have anywhere from 1 to 7 species of grass. So if it's like a Bermuda grass or a bluegrass or a fescue, it just kind of depends. I think anywhere from 6 to 12 inches. I couldn't give you an exact though. Sorry.
And how long does it, because usually it's what, towards the end of the season that it actually drops seed?
I think it'll drop seed as it grows. I don't know. It's just at the end of the season. Not like a prairie grass, yeah, or like a native grass. Those all seed generally kind of through the season or like at the end of the season, but like a turf grass, it's not a native thing. So I think it grows, hits its pot, and then seeds out. To answer your question.
I think so.
So those are our 2 slides for standards and comparables, just to kind of frame the question for Chris here.
Brings us back to the allowable height. The county had the 12 inches. Is there a desire to change from that standard?
Undeveloped.
Mhm.
Does that mean that would a plot be considered undeveloped? Or would that be like if a vacant lot is next to, in between like 2 developed lots?
I think you could consider it that way. Are you asking if that's how the other cities compare?
Right, I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand
Yeah,
that.
you know.
You don't think so?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Norwalk, it shows undeveloped but platted areas, so I would assume
So
that would
that's-
probably be vacant lot.
But if there's a house on it and it's vacant, then that wouldn't be the same thing. It wouldn't be undeveloped.
The property would be vacant, but that wouldn't be a vacant lot
Yeah.
because you have a house there.
I mean, I think my hesitation was coming from setting a standard, assuming that you have turf grass, meaning that you would have to have an exception to have prairie grass, and you'd have to register it in some way. You'd have to like communicate that in some way. And when we should be promoting native grasses as the default. So I'm like hesitant to say like 12 inches or 15 inches or 10 inches or anything like that, because I'm just like hesitant because I can see this program going forward and us just mowing down native lawns and like requiring people to register, requiring people to have a sign, requiring people to do something or another when that should be our default is native grasses, like absent of something like sightlines being an issue.
I mean, this program has been operating at 12 inches, and I've not gotten a lot of folks talk. I mean, I don't know that the way it's working now that it is impeding that. I agree we should be mindful of it, but I think it's been more the nuisance properties and people just not maintaining their property. And I do think that there is some value in continuing
Yeah.
that piece. So I guess I'm comfortable at the 12 inches. And, but I think we should be thinking about these other issues and how to facilitate folks who want to do something else proactive. That piece is a little harder because I think that's the piece that's new to all this. I don't think the county had considered that, and I don't know what examples are out there of other communities that have effectively considered that.
I would agree. I think especially going into this year, I mean, I think 12 inches is, looking at these other cities, is pretty high. And I think it really is addressing in most cases that any contact I've come in with is about people that are not in their house. It's empty houses and nobody's taking care of it. It's not because they have a senior program that they'll continue doing that. So I think it's more that issue. But I think as far as you have a standard height, 12 inches is a good start just to keep it consistent. But I think to your point, think more work needs to be done on how do you separate if people are really doing natural grasses in a way that, how do you differentiate? I think it's usually is pretty clearly differentiated because somebody's taking care of it still.
I think it would be helpful because I agree with the distinction between vacant properties and occupied properties, that if we were able to make a distinction, that we should. But I think it'd be helpful to look at what other cities are doing around native plantings, and see if we can also, I would like to see us promoting native plantings in a more substantive way. And so if there's anything you can bring back about that, that would be helpful as well.
Chris or Dalton, do you have a sense that how many with rental homes that the renter is responsible for mowing? So are we going to get into issues that their rental agreement requires them to mow and they're not doing it, so then we're going to be assessing the property owner? I guess that's between the property owner and the renter. If the renter is ringing up bills, or fines.
Yeah, that would be a civil issue. So
I'll let them work it out between the two parties. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So we deal with the owner of the property, or the legally interested party. So the renter, whatever they have in their lease arrangement with their owner, is between those two parties. So,
okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Schumacher, to answer your question about what other cities are doing, in my research, I found that a lot of towns provide like yard signs, like a garage sale sign that people would put back on their yard, something along the lines of, this is a native prairie area or native habitat, please don't call us in, we're trying to make pollinator habitat, or something like that. So a little more proactive. And then your question about like promoting native plants, I'm pretty sure that the city does have a stormwater program where they cost share native plants through the stormwater utility fund. And Scott, you might be able to shed more light on that. But
I'm wondering about the concept of something where the city could design what that sign is, so then it's somewhat certified if you've got that.
My concern is that we're asking people to say, please don't mow my lawn, when what they're doing should be the default. And if we can promote it in more ways, like, I don't think anyone's going to agree with me saying this, but saying that native lawn is the default and that everybody else would need a sign because we don't want turf grass. Like, I'm saying that we shouldn't have people who are trying to maintain their lawn in a way that's restoring prairie to its like natural habitat saying, please don't mow my lawn, and having to put a sign up, and if that gets blown away, if that gets missed or something like that, their lawn gets mowed down.
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm going to guess it's a really low number.
Right, but the number should be higher.
Right. But you're asked, yeah. Okay, understood.
And that could be something we could do through our sustainability when we're talking about the gardens and things like that. And I think there's been a lot of infrastructure talking about rain gardens. And I've seen a lot of front yards transform the rain gardens for the water issues. So I think you can promote it, but I don't think at this point, most people have got their yards and they're mowing them or maintaining them in some way. I think we can promote it, but I think for this purpose of what we're doing here, we have to deal with who has what the majority of the people have now. That doesn't mean it can't change eventually, but for what we're trying to take care of by June 1st, I think we need to get something in place.
Okay, next topic, repeat offender, and I think this is something we could look at with our vacant property registry. It's kind of touching on that topic as we've been talking today. If there's a different way that we need to handle repeat offenders, is that something you want us to look at as a part of this?
Isn't there something about repeat offenders on clearing sidewalks that the fees ramp up? Didn't we just recently change that?
I don't know.
Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So
We
there'd
could look
be,
at that.
be parallel that if you continue, we're not the default
Yeah.
mowing company, so yeah, I think we changed something the last couple of years.
So we're looking for an escalator.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
We could look at that
Okay,
change that was made with
that'd be
the
great.
snow
Thanks.
removal.
Carl, I don't know that I heard your thoughts on the height. The 12-inch.
12-inch.
12.
Okay,
It's
thank
fine.
you. Anything, Mayor, that you wanted to add? Okay.
And the last one I know we still have for discussion, this is something we are currently reviewing with legal, is how we handle backyards, kind of more the secured areas, a fenced-in backyard, how we will be able to handle that moving forward. That's something we are discussing with legal.
So I know that we have, or that the senior program is still going to be going on. Are we going to have anything in our appeal process for like extensions allowed and things like that if somebody like doesn't have access to a mower, or if they don't have like the ability to mow, and looking for other options?
I don't believe there is anything with the way the county currently handles it. I don't think there is.
Okay, maybe we should look into that. Like if someone is filing an appeal after they got a notice, and is there like some kind of determination that can be made saying like, I'm not gonna fine you for this or something like that because you don't have access to a mower right now, but you're working on it or something like that.
That would be unusual.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think if there's other examples where we would allow an infraction and an excuse of not able. Trying to think what else would.
I mean, do we have any for snow removal? Do we do anything different with snow removal?
Yeah, maybe.
Better.
Or we could ask the county to see about expanding the senior program to maybe also include a income qualified portion of the program.
Or disability portion.
Try that.
Right, disability or income qualified.
Yeah.
I don't know that would be a huge number of these, but maybe the county would be willing to think about something like that.
Yeah, I think it's such a slippery slope that I think what may work is an actual program where you sign up and you qualify. If we're, I mean, that's where the administrator, this is where the appeals process gets sticky as well, because they would be hearing those appeals. And if it's a one-time situation, they have to be careful because they have to be consistent. So
I'm just referring to our public housing program. We
Yeah.
have 34 scattered site public housing units, and even before then, when we've had much more, the residents were always required to mow. The only caveat had if they were elderly or disabled, the housing agency would mow on their behalf. But if they weren't, they were expected to mow. So they'd have a lawnmower.
I guess, sorry, I'm just thinking like temporary disability as well could be a factor.
then they need to make arrangements. So am I asking, or am I hearing you say to have programs that allow for temporary situation?
Potentially.
I don't think you allow someone to just keep the infraction going. You've got to find a solution to remove the infraction.
Okay. The program could be a solution offered as well.
Yeah, so an expansion of what the county does.
But I mean, at the time of appeal, if somebody doesn't know about the program because they have no reason to know about the
And
program.
then that's where your administrative ruling could be, we'll give you an exception this one time, and here's the program you need
Okay.
to sign up for. I think that could potentially work.
Okay.
This does bring us to the end today. I think we have enough, I think, for direction to start with the request for proposals. The height was the key with that. This does give us something to start on working on a policy for council review. And I know there is still ongoing discussions with the county on what any partnership looks like for this coming year. But I know we'll be back in front of you at another time just to review the draft policies, probably our next step.
So just quickly review where we are for this calendar year, 2023.
Yep. So on the 9th, we did get approval we did discuss the staffing, the additional staffing that we are going to have in place for this. So those changes are happening right now. We were able to hire an additional supervisor. Jason Winters here, just to view this, but he's our new neighbor inspection supervisor. We have 2 additional inspectors that recruitment is going to get started here shortly, I believe. And we have an administrative position that's going to be hired as well. The next step is putting together the request for proposals. So to put that together, the height requirement was one of the key pieces that we did need to have for that. So this is going to help shape the request for proposals.
For the actual mowing.
For the actual mowing, sorry.
So
For
you're
the
going to contract it out? You're
Yes.
not going to do it in-house? You're not going to hire seasonal staff to do this?
Correct.
And my guess is we're going to have a backup plan. Public Works has been part of the discussion for when contractors don't live up to the standards of the contracts, which I will fully expect.
Do we feel that we will probably have to have more than one contractor to
Yeah.
cover this many?
And availability.
Yeah.
Right, that's, I'm just questioning, how many we're going to, if this is going to be difficult to find, because I know that's why the county, they had difficulty just getting the seasonal help,
Yeah.
so.
And Chris, do we have any idea, like, has there been any mapping of among the 8,000 plus, I mean, this would be something that for attending neighborhood meetings would be interesting information to have if that could be made available.
Yeah, I know. I don't think we have done mapping yet on it, but I know we do have access to the addresses, so that's something we could look at doing.
I'm just trying to think. Well, I think it'd be interesting information for the council members,
Yeah.
certainly, so.
And to see if Polk County has any historical records regarding that.
Address.
Yeah, yeah.
We do.
So they could do that, Carl, sounds like.
And if we have addresses, I mean, there might be a reason just to reach out to the property owners and say, hey, this is being transitioned, and, we know that the weed commissioners have been at your property previously. How's this year going to look? So.
Okay, this is helpful because we'll design a program to start June 1st and develop these budgets. One of the next big policy discussions will be the question about fines, because we will come back with what we expect the total cost to be. But a lot of those costs we know are not going to be recoverable because it will be inspections that are done to after a complaint, it's going to be complaint received. And so people manning the phones and emails about complaints. Then the actual inspections to verify, and then the notices, and people may actually take care of it after they receive the notice, for which then at that point we receive no revenue from that property owner. And so there's going to be a lot of built-in costs that will not be recoverable. And so then that question of a fine in addition to the cost of mowing may be something you want to look at. Or remember that anything that's not picked up by this program ends up just being a taxpayer cost. And so as you're thinking through that, we'll want to keep that in mind.
But some of this we already deal with today, right? I mean, we get complaints that
Pass
come
on.
into us that we've passed on to the county. I mean, so some of
some of that is just built in.
And that's probably the easiest part, is the complaint, the
Yeah,
inspection,
or
the
inspection. I was
inspections
going to say,
is
is
where
the
it gets.
inspectors are driving through a neighborhood, they see it too, so it's not like
Yeah.
it's a, and they probably turned it into Polk County, so.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's a minimal cost, yes, mowing and the notices and all of that's where it gets more expensive.
Okay. That gives us a good start. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for attending this morning. It looks like this meeting's adjourned.